Today's recipe is inspired by my grandmother. It is a sweet and sour brisket that, while it's not exactly her recipe, is inspired by the recipe that she used to make when I was a kid and me and my brother and my parents would go and visit her, and she would always bring out this sweet and sour brisket. It was actually sweet and sour brisket and tongue, which I've left out the tongue for any number of reasons, not the least of which it's not all that popular these days, I don't think. So I've made just a brisket, which is super delicious and definitely reminds me of my grandmother. I'm starting off simply seasoning my brisket. I've trimmed the fat cap to about 1/4 of an inch. You don't want to get rid of it completely, but you don't want a huge hunk of fat sitting on top of your brisket. So a little bit is fine. It adds flavor, it adds unctuousness to the sauce, but you don't want to be like overwhelmed by a big hunk of fat on top. I'm gonna set that aside for a sec. Get sweetness and texture from the onions in the sauce, as well as sweetness and a little bit of spice from either ketchup or chili sauce. I like chili sauce. It's really nice because it has a little bit of spiciness. And then some acidity from vinegar. There's also some brown sugar in here, so it's pretty sweet. But I think that that's like the kind of cooking that my dad grew up eating, and I certainly loved it when I was a kid, and it was a huge hit in the kitchen when we made it, when I was developing it. So I think you guys will love it too. Slice your onions. It's a lot of onion. You need 4 cups. Seems like a lot, but it really cooks down in the sauce because this cooks for a total of, let's see, almost 4 hours, which is a long time. And these are just sort of simmering down and getting sweet and unctuous and amazing in that sauce. 2 large onions should give you what you need for this. These onions were so big that I don't even need the second half. If you cut up an onion, you don't need the whole thing. I recommend putting the rest of the onion in a glass jar or some kind of glass container in order to store it in the refrigerator so that it doesn't infuse anything plastic with the flavor and that it keeps the smell of the onion out of your refrigerator. You're going to want to start off by sautéing your onions in some oil. I'm using a neutral flavored oil for this, not olive oil. So like a safflower oil or canola oil if that's your thing. Whoa, that pan was hotter than I thought. This onion will cool it right down. Season with 2 teaspoons of salt and 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper, and then just cook your onions until they are sort of translucent. That usually takes about 3 to 5 minutes. This pan was very hot, it might be a little bit faster. I'm getting a little caramelization on my onions, and that's totally fine too. I have my oven preheating to 400 degrees right now because this is going to cook in the oven after I do this initial first step. When your onions have gotten translucent, and mine got a little bit brown, totally fine, add some stock. It's 2 cups of chicken broth. You could use beef broth if you have it, but don't use the store-bought beef. If you have homemade, go ahead. But I've yet to find a store-bought beef broth that I like. But chicken broth's not so bad. A cup of ketchup or chili sauce. This is ketchup. 1/2 cup of brown sugar, and 1/3 of a cup of vinegar. It's white vinegar. Then what you want to do is bring this to a boil. That's your braising liquid. Now this is going to braise in the oven, but because I'm not browning my brisket ahead of time, which is amazing, you don't have to do that, you're going to want to pour this over the brisket on top of the stove and bring it to a boil. That just starts the cooking off because your brisket, while it should be room temperature, might be, it's a little cool. So you want to start it off a little bit quickly so it doesn't take forever in the oven. So put it over a burner or 2 burners and then pour your liquid over your brisket. This will only work if your roasting pan is nice and heavy, otherwise it will make your pan buckle, which is not good, and then you don't have a flat surface in your roasting pan. So please don't try to do this if your roasting pan is not heavy. So this is just starting it off. It's getting the brisket a little bit warm. It'll make it so that when you put it into the oven, it's already at a simmer, so it doesn't take so long to come back to a simmer. All right, so now that it's at a simmer, I want to cover it up. Get some parchment. This is parchment lined foil. Parchment protects the foil from getting little holes in it from the acidity in the tomato. Cover it up. Just careful, your pan might be hot right now. Cook this at 400 degrees for 30 minutes. And then reduce the oven temperature to 350 and cook it for another hour and 15 minutes. And then I'm gonna uncover it and add some vegetables. So after about an hour and 45 minutes, you're gonna add your vegetables, which are potatoes and carrots. These are Yukon Gold potatoes. You want them in kind of biggish chunks, so I'm gonna cut my carrots into 1.5 or 2-inch lengths. When you get to that thicker end, cut it in half. I like to use the really thick, big, meaty carrots for this, not the thinner ones, so that they hold their shape and they just have a really great texture when they're cooked, so look for the big carrots. The carrots actually hold up surprisingly well during cooking, so even if you get the thinner carrots, you can put them in at the same time as the potatoes and they will hold their texture really nicely. Potatoes should be cut into 1.5-inch pieces. Again, nice and chunky. Okay, now you can take the brisket out of the oven. All right, uncover. You're not going to need this again, so get rid of that. And then add the potatoes and carrots to the roasting pan. You'll notice that the brisket has shrunk a lot already. That's what happens. Brisket shrinks a lot. It's putting all of its delicious juices into the sauce, so it's win-win, I guess. This needs to cook a total of 2 more hours approximately. You're wanting to cook it until the brisket is nice and tender, and in the last hour, start basting the top of the brisket in order to get some caramelization. Don't do it too early because all the sugars in that sauce might cause your brisket to get kind of too caramelized, like burnt? Burnt? No. Too caramelized, like burnt. Put the quotes in totally the wrong spot. When your brisket is done, you want to let it rest. And in fact, what you can do if you want to is make this the day ahead and then refrigerate it overnight and then reheat it the next day, and it's even better. But if you don't do that, you have to let it rest for a little while before you slice it. So give it like 20, 30 minutes. Then you can slice it up. Give it a slice. You're supposed to slice it against the grain, but sometimes when you're first slicing, you can't even really tell where the grain is. So I'm just gonna slice it this way. I don't even know. Nope, wrong. Oh man, it's so good. It takes a couple tries. The other thing about brisket is the grain actually goes in a couple of different directions. So you'll be slicing and you'll be like, oh, I'm doing it perfectly. And then all of a sudden it starts going another direction. You're like, oh no. It's gonna be delicious no matter how you slice it though. I guarantee it. I'm not even gonna slice the whole thing because I'm gonna save some for later. Transfer to a platter. Oops. Put the meat on one side. And then some of the veg and sauce. And you can see that those onions have totally cooked down. They're amazingly succulent now. They've really just dissolved into the sauce, which is really, really, really nice and exactly what I'm looking for. Drizzle some of the sauce over the meat. Kind of made a mess. So I want to make this pretty so my grandma would be proud. Even though I have to say, I remember when I would go to my grandma's house, I think she would always just like take it out of the freezer, and then whatever we didn't eat, she would put back in the freezer and take out the next time we came. I'm pretty sure that's what happened. But she would put it on a nice pretty platter in the middle. You want to put some parsley on just for a little bit of freshness, you can. I'm sure my grandmother did not do that. That's it. This is so delicious, so comforting, so amazing. You guys should give this a try, and please write in the comments below and tell me if you like it, if you don't like it. No, don't tell me if you don't like it. Just tell me if you like it. Enjoy. If you like recipes like this and you want more, make sure to click like and subscribe because we have plenty more where this came from.